Why is the mainstream media hiding the fact that thousands upon thousands of Jews have joined together with pro-Palestinian protests to say enough is enough, end this war, end the killing, end the fighting? Some are organized, some, and actually many more, of course, are not organized. They're coming out and they're calling for a ceasefire. I find this fascinating. It's almost like the mainstream news media has an agenda, doesn't want you to know about it. The mainstream media wants you to believe that all Jews are fine with the destruction of Gaza, and they are going after Hamas because of what happened on October 7th, and everyone is unified. They won't even show you really the protests in Israel out in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's offices, right? Everyone's unified, and all Jews are pro going into Gaza, pro going after Hamas. That's it. No, there's no gray area here at all.
No diversity of thought.
Yeah, no diversity of thought. That's how the mainstream media wants you to think about this. And that everyone is going to these protests, by the way, are all pro-Hamas. So everyone going to these protests are terrorists or I don't know, they're pro-Hamas, they're anti-Semites. So that's who's going to these protests. That's how the mainstream media is portraying this with all these anti-Semitic slogans. And yes, there have been plenty of anti-Semitic slogans at these protests. There's been vile things said about Jews at these protests. We've covered them. There's been a lot of that. So there's no like hiding of what's been said. There's been swastikas showing up at these protests. I saw one picture of one guy with a phone with his swastika held up during one of these pro-Palestinian protests. Of course, the media zeroed right in on that guy, right? But why do you think they're not
out of Trudeau's book?
Right, exactly. So why do you? I'll ask this in the comments though. Like, why do you think they're portraying it this way? I mean, I don't have the answers, so I'm just throwing it out to you guys. Why do you think the media is portraying it this way? We'll let you decide on this. We're not going to force it down your throats. You guys make your own decisions about this. But we want to shine a light on this story because the mainstream media is ignoring it for some reason, and I find it fascinating. And that's what we do here on Redacted: is cover the stories the mainstream media ignores. So this weekend, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, from India to London to America, all over, came out to protest the war and demand a ceasefire to stop the horrific killing of civilians. And yes, I will even make fun of a protester calling for anti-war who is wearing a mask outside. But to read the headlines and watch the coverage, you think it's only Palestinians who came to a protest. Or as some news outlets called them, pro-Hamas protests. They literally labeled them pro-Hamas protests. That's it. It's Arabs versus Jews, and there's no gray area whatsoever. There can't possibly be Jews that don't want the destruction of all of Palestine or all Palestinians to be killed and pushed out of the Gaza Strip. Oh, but there are.
We have one on our show all the time. Meet Dan Cohen.
Yeah, the others exactly. And many are organized. And again, many are not organized. And here's just a small sampling from this weekend of some of these protests, Jewish Americans and others against the war coming out to these protests that the media has ignored.
I'm a Jewish person. I am totally anti-Zionist on principle. Zionism is a racist, settler, colonial ideology that is responsible for 75 years of brutality and that is responsible for producing the resistance against it. I just tell people there's nothing anti-Semitic about calling for equality. What's anti-Semitic about saying all people deserve to be treated equally? That's what this movement is about, right? The call for a free Palestine from the river to the sea is the call for equal rights for everybody. The complete opposite of what the Israeli regime has been about for 75 years.
So that river to the sea comment, ooh, could really come back to haunt that guy, right? That's what people describe as a terrorist comment, right? He's calling for there. He's calling basically for terrorism from the river to the sea.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a phrase born out of Yasser Arafat's era, of course, in the 1960s. And it's a phrase that refers to having a free Palestine from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea.
Oh.
Under basically what the United Nations had laid out, essentially, the connection between those points. where you would have this sort of strip of land right through the middle of what is now Israel, but what was Palestine. But this area would be for Palestinians, and of course it was rejected. And we can go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, that's where that comes from, of course. But that's being labeled by some. If you hear that being shouted at a rally, that's a call for terrorism. That's a call for terrorism. That's a call for the eradication of Jews.
He was meaning it as
a Jew,
a two-state solution.
Yes,
that's
or
what he
an adherence to the Oslo Accords. I don't know what was in his mind, and I'm not going to speak for that gentleman. Or an adherence to the United Nations after World War II and what the plan was. So maybe that's what he's referring to. I don't exactly know, but certainly not what it looks like today.
Can we have a little bit of a talk, though, about the definition of Zionism, though? Because I think it means different things to different people. For some, it just means Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. I think that's a very distracting question, whether or not Israel should exist. For others, it means pro-Netanyahu government, right? And others, I just think that it's thrown around in a strange way because, and then it becomes a way that, either that is thrown against anti-Semitism. Like, I don't think the two things go.
Well, they're conflating.
Right.
So the major problem that people are doing right now today is that they're conflating anti-Zionism, political Zionism, and they're conflating it with anti-Semitism. And this is where people go off the rails, right? So you have Jews who were, in concentration camps in Auschwitz. You had Jews who escaped from Auschwitz, who then went to their Zionist leaders, went to the heads of the Jewish leadership in Hungary and in Budapest and other areas, and reported what was happening at Auschwitz. We just got out of there. We're the first two Jews to ever escape. Hundreds of thousands more Jews are going to be killed. You need to stop this. But the Zionists, of course, had collaborated with the Nazis to protect themselves, to build power. Well known that they've collaborated with the Nazis. It is highly documented. I'm the first to say
they had a shared goal of the exodus of Jews from Eastern Europe in order to establish a state inside Jerusalem. So in and around Jerusalem.
So, and in fact, the Jews that escaped from Auschwitz said that they felt that the Zionists were just as contemptible as the Nazis because they did nothing, and they collaborated with the Jews. They collaborated with the Nazis to kill hundreds of thousands of Jews in the concentration camps, specifically at Auschwitz is what I'm referring to from that example. Well,
I just would like to put a little context on this anti-Zionism, because there was in the 70s and 80s a post-Zionist academic movement. There's a great book about this called The Idea of Israel by Ilan Pappé. And what he says is that academics, historians, anthropologists, artists, filmmakers all had this movement to basically what the United States has done is reconcile our history of slavery and admit it as a part of that, to dismantle the Zionist narrative that that land was just there and waiting for them in order to create a peaceful existence. That's the reason for this. Now, this was very much shut down by the Israeli government. Those academics either had a full-on mea culpa turnaround like Benny Morris, or were expelled from Israel or felt chased out of Israel. And so that is where the government started using this term self-hating Jew for these people who just wanted to reconcile this past and create a peaceful solution for the future. And also the idea of Holocaust deniers, because they wanted to not deny that the Holocaust happened, but acknowledged the Zionist collaboration in it. And that is because otherwise, most of you might think like, who denies the Holocaust, right? That is a very powerful term to put down this academic movement that the Israeli government did not want, the conversation they never wanted to have, and now we're having it.
EL, thank you for your super chat, says EL Herzog, and the super chat says, Israelis are unified in their determination to destroy Hamas, not to kill all Palestinians. Maybe you should tell that to some of the leadership, by the way, similar to how the Allies were determined to destroy the Nazis, but not all Germans. Okay, I take your point. That's interesting to hear that. I don't know that we can ever paint one people with one, like they're all unified against this.
Sure.
They all feel this way. Like, have you asked all 5 million of them? Like, that's how you feel? Because there's a hell of a lot of people right now protesting for Netanyahu to resign. So it seems like there's a pretty big conflict as far as what people believe in Israel right now, and not everyone's on the same page with everything. But I'd love to hear. We've certainly featured interviews from people here who think that all Palestinians, regardless of a Hamas affiliation, should be wiped off the face of the earth. That they are human animals. They're basically animals. That's the reference. So are those people, how do those people, how do you square that, like those different viewpoints on that? I don't like painting everybody with one broad brush like that.
Right. And the people who do not support a ceasefire because of this appetite for killing Hamas, I really want to know how then you reconcile the fact that it's become so much more violent than that. Is that still okay for this end goal? Right. Yeah. And when I have conversations with people about this, can't support a ceasefire because we must put down Hamas, my answer is I'm never going to be convinced that bombs and weapons are the answer. I just won't. So that's one bit of it. But also our history on the war on terror over the last 3 decades has shown us that anytime you try and stamp up terror, you inspire others. And so until we get to the root of this, we just have a warring planet. And that, I guess, is what we're agreeing to.
So these Jews believe the real enemy of Israel are the corrupt Zionist leaders. That's who's been showing up to these protests. And these anti-Zionist Jews are showing up all over these protests. And Muslims were thanking them. Here's one Muslim caught on camera over the weekend, thanking the Jews who are calling for a ceasefire, going up to them and giving them a kiss on the cheek and saying, thank you for calling out these Zionists. And this young man, he's like, okay, thank you. Here's a hug. And just reading sort of like the comments on that, people are like, we need more of this, like love in the world, the peace. Yes, bring peace. It was amazing to read some of the responses to this. These anti-Zionist Jews are showing up all over these protests. And again, Muslims were thanking them for it. Here's these Jews believe that the real enemy of Israel are the corrupt Zionist leaders who don't give a rat's ass about Judaism at all. They wear it like a blanket. They used to believe that, of course, Zionists kicked Palestinians out of their homes and aligned themselves with Western warmongers. And you were seeing it from all of these different protests, like this gentleman. I'm a Jew, stop killing. Jews who are speaking out against the war, of course, are getting death threats. So if you are Jewish and you're speaking out against this and you're calling attention to this, there's been a lot of death threats leveled against these individuals, unfortunately, because it goes against the narrative. And that's why you're not seeing it in the mainstream media. It's well documented. Here's just one example. Here was an anti-Zionist portion of one of these rallies, and you can see how heated it gets from people that are not in agreement with these anti-Zionist Jews. Watch. He's asking, do you care about Jewish people? Do you care about Jewish people?
Be ashamed of yourself right now! Be ashamed of yourself! Disgusting creatures!
Creatures. They're creatures. They're creatures. So it's well documented that Zionists collaborated with Hitler and the Nazis. Very clearly, any idiot with a brain can read a history book and see how well documented that is. They openly allowed the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Jews while protecting and enriching themselves. Jews that escaped Auschwitz, as we talked about here, told the Zionists what was happening and unfolded in the concentration camps. Those that escaped Auschwitz believed that the Zionists were just as bad as the Nazis. And I saw a bunch of people in the chat saying, fact, fact, fact. Yeah, read a book. Understand your history.
Yeah, it's
well known.
It's very uncomfortable, but it's not hard to verify.
Well, and I have a lot of Israeli friends, and the Israeli friends tell me, they're like, it was unbelievable in the early days, right after the war. When Jews who were in concentration camps were coming back to Israel, there was this, we don't even believe that you were in a concentration camp from the Zionists. We don't even, that you're making that up. We don't believe it.
Well, there was a prejudice
project
against people who did not leave early and then were victimized when they did arrive. There was also a major political movement to get into survivors' camps after the war and recruit those people to go to Israel because many of them wanted to get the heck out of the region, out of the time zone. A lot of them wanted to go to the UK or the US, and they were conscripted.
So this weekend, a Zionist decided to yell at Jews who are protesting the war. Here's what she said to them. Here, listen to her.
Too bad, but we're here and you're gonna go to hell.
So,
that's a
so
nice thing
she's telling those anti-war, anti-Zionist Jews that Hitler made a mistake in not putting you in a gas chamber.
That's awful.
And that she would be okay though as a Zionist. She'd be fine, right? Because she's one of the wealthy elites, I guess, and powerful, and she would have been helping to coordinate that, I guess. Unbelievable. Imagine saying that to another human being.
No, I couldn't imagine. Like, did you see the videos on Twitter also of the Israeli police throwing Jews around that were?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was
exactly. The pro-peace Jews who, and being thrown around by police
in Israel.
Right, but you won't see that. You'll only see that on social media. You're not going to see that on NBC Nightly News or CNN or Fox News or anything because it goes against the narrative, right? So, but instead of covering the mainstream media, instead of covering these nuanced stories because they're uncomfortable, they then hide it. The Western media, Western leaders have taken to labeling these protests as hate marches. So if you were there and you were like pro-peace and you don't want people dying, like that Jewish guy who was like, hey, I'm a Jew and I absolutely don't want people to be killed. And you're a hate marcher. That's who you are. Here's UK Home Secretary saying police should decide for themselves if these protesters, should be arrested, thrown in prison for carrying out what she calls hate marches. She dances around, though, whether the police should outright arrest them. She's like, I'll let that up to them to decide. But yeah, I really believe that they're fomenting terror. Listen.
But to be clear, you don't think it should go ahead?
I think I've been pretty clear that these are hate marches. They are, I think chanting of jihad on the streets of Britain in the 21st century is utterly despicable. And I don't see how any decent person or how the vast majority of the British people can find that to be acceptable behaviour. It's sickening.
You call them hate marches. Do you think everyone on these marches is hateful, as you put it?
I think, as I say, if you've seen images of hundreds of people chanting jihad, being corralled to do so,
everyone, even on the fringes of these marches,
flags,
is hateful.
Chanting from the river to the sea, which is a call to arms used by terrorists, celebrating the largest single loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, glorifying acts of terrorism. I don't think there's any other way but to call them hate marches.
Well, there are a couple of other ways you could label them, but you do you. By the way, look at the reporter's face when she's explaining what she's hearing. And she gives her a couple of opportunities, to say like, hey, are you really going along with this? I'm giving you an opportunity.
You
here.
want to double down here,
you
girl?
Double down on this. These are hate marches. Like, are you going to go with that or not? Her face was amazing. So here's a sampling. If you want to just see some sampling of all of these hate marches this weekend, watch the hate. This was London. Thousands there. They're chanting "Free Palestine."
Every
Occupation
minute we waste,
no more.
people are being killed in Gaza in real time. And I think people understand that. And that's why thousands, tens of thousands of people are gathered here today.
A lot of hate. There's a lot of hate there. A lot of hate. Now, I should be clear, as I covered earlier in this segment, there absolutely has been hate. There has been anti-Semitism. There's been really vile things leveled against Jews at some of these other protests. We've talked about it here on the show. Absolutely. There's been awful and vile things. But to label these people and Jews coming together with Palestinians and calling for peace, labeling them hate marchers, labeling them, just by using the word jihad, which is a totally conflated word, by the way, and totally taken out of context as well. That's been, since 9/11, that's been a word that's been bastardized by extremists. So There's other things you could label these things, but I think it's amazing that the Western media is totally hiding this story and not calling attention to the fact that, yes, there are Jews who want peace, who don't want people being killed. And that doesn't mean you're pro-Palestine.
Or that you don't care about the October 7th attacks.
Right. I mean, this is what, so someone in the chat just a second ago, Nathaniel says, Redacted is pro-Palestine? You make me sick. Thank you, Nathaniel. I'm sorry that you're sick because we do not like people being killed. And we actually want a ceasefire and for there to be cooler heads to prevail and come together at a table and actually have a talk and a discussion about some sort of a solution. I don't have the solution, whether it's a 2-state, 1-state, or no state. I have no idea. But all I know is I don't want people dying and I don't want war. And I don't want people being killed on either side. October 7th, we condemned what Hamas did to innocent people and to those soldiers and taking hostages. Well, and we're condemning what's happening now in Palestine. We're not pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. Yeah, we're pro-human being, for crying out loud.
Exactly. We're pro the human beings of the world that get caught in the middle of this government wars. These are wars started by governments, fought by governments, and innocent people just get in the way of their agendas. We're for the innocent people around the world that get caught up in this shit.
Yeah, I was in America this week, and I was in a bunch of spots in America. And I was talking to a bunch of different people who are Redacted viewers, and it was funny to hear from them. They were like, "We are anti-war," and well, you would think, oh, Americans must all be warmongers. No, it's the government. It's the governments that are warmongering and fomenting these wars around the world. It's not the American people. The American people want to grow up and have their beautiful families and have the kids go to a great school and have a job and groceries they can afford and come home at the end of the day and play, soccer in the backyard with their son and daughters. That's what they want. They don't want wars. But that's what these governments want, and that's what these governments are doing. They're making money off of it. They're making billions of dollars off of it, and these innocent people get caught in between.
And that's also why you don't see that on the mainstream media. You don't see all the wars we're in. You don't see all the destruction, because if people knew that, like when people found out about Vietnam, millions of people went to New York and protested, because if people know that there's war, they protest. And this is a very, the media is covering this war extensively. And that's why you're seeing these huge numbers of people protesting all around the world. And that's exactly why it's hidden from the United States, because they know that if they show too much, they show the caskets coming home in the airplanes, they show the reality of war, we stand up against it because we all hate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to kind of dissect that comment a little bit, though, because it's weird to me, because we're coming out saying we're anti-war. We don't believe that people in Palestine should be just carpet bombed, and the person's like, well, that makes you pro-Palestinian. That makes me sick. So if you drill it down, saying I don't want Palestinians bombed is offensive enough to somebody that makes them sick. That means that the opposite of that must make them feel well, which is carpet bombing civilians. And that is just mind-blowing to me that you would take that stance.
So Nathaniel will ask you that, right, to Philip's point. Philip's very smart. So then the opposite must be true, right? If you're pro-Palestine, right? Or you say it, Philip. So that must...
If you're against a ceasefire.
Right, if you're against a ceasefire.
Yeah, if us saying stop bombing civilians in Palestine makes us pro-Palestinian, and that therefore makes you sick, then what makes you well, to me, what you're saying is what makes you well, then what makes you happy is the actual carpet bombing of civilians in Palestine.
Yeah.
Right,
because
so Nathaniel, let's ask you.
Go. At no point did we say we are pro-Hamas, because who is? We're saying we're pro like the civilians of Palestine, and that makes this person sick, that we want them to survive.
Right.
Just like regular families living their lives, us wanting them to have that opportunity is a sickening act.
Yeah.
I mean, that just,
yeah. So, Nathaniel, we'll ask you, do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy carpet bombing of innocent people? Like, does that make you happy at night when you're sitting around the dinner table with your wife or whatever? Do you talk about you enjoy that? Do you seek those videos out on social media? Do you go on Telegram and look at people being slaughtered? Like, does that make you happy? Seriously, it's a great question. If the opposite makes you sick, peace makes you sick,
then war makes you happy.
Then war must make you happy.
Well, and And to defend, not to defend what he's saying, but to defend him a little bit, like we don't know. We know that the mainstream media tells people lies. We know that people get their information from things that aren't true. So sometimes when they believe those awful things, it's because they believe the narrative that they've been given through propaganda, and they think things have happened that actually haven't. And if you think those things have happened, then maybe you are more apt to really solidly plant a flag, because I can't think another human being would think that if they knew what was actually going on over there. So that tells me maybe they actually don't.
Yeah, because we just got a super chat here from RTX. Says, why does the mainstream media, and why does no one in the mainstream media ask Israel, hey Israel, why did you create Hamas and ISIS? We, at the very outset of this conflict, we specifically talked about that here on this show. Of course, Hamas was funded by Israel and the United States. They had no weapons until the United States made them what they are today. And Israel's open about it. Netanyahu admitted, of course, they were funding Hamas. So they created Hamas. Yeah, it's a great question. No one in the mainstream media will ask that question. No one in the White House press corps is going to raise their hand and ask Karine Jean-Pierre, like, you know, how does President Obama feel about having helped create Hamas?
Right.
Or like adding to it, you know?
One voice that I haven't seen very much, and maybe it's just, you know, the algorithm is not surfacing these voices to me. So if you've seen, is people who felt like, oh, we need our revenge on Hamas, let's go Israel, and then has seen the extent of this coverage and was like, oh, this is not what I meant. That's too much, right? It's like when you tell your boyfriend to go beat up someone that hit on you, and then your boyfriend beats that person until they're almost dead, right? And it's like, wait a minute, this is, you know what I mean?
Did that happen?
No.
Okay.
It was in a book that I read recently. It's like, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Maybe that analogy didn't land. No?
Well, no, I get your point where you're like, oh, that might be nice. That guy was, I wouldn't say hitting on me. That would be a sociopathic. But if a guy did something bad to you, like, you know,
the specific example in Trevor Noah's book, he talks about how some boys were mean to him, and he told his stepdad, and his stepdad went and beat the ever-loving crap out of these young boys because he was violent, the stepdad, and he knew it. So he like set a pit bull on somebody, and then when he saw how bad that kid got hurt, he felt bad about it. It was like, whoa, I took that too far. So I'm asking, are there voices like that? That's like, oh, I wanted revenge, but not like this. Right. Have you seen voices like this that maybe I'm missing because the algorithm doesn't? Because surely the mainstream media is not going to give those people voices, but they must be out there. So let me know.
Well, I think we've had a great show tonight. And I think I love all of the back and forth discussion. I think we have the smartest audience in I don't know, what do you call this, television, in YouTube, in Rumble,
in broadcast.
In broadcast. I love the back and forth with you guys. Again, we don't have all the answers, and we don't pretend to. All we are is pro-peace, and we're asking questions of these leaders who lie to us on a regular basis. They have the billion-dollar intelligence apparatus and machine that are controlling everything that you see and hear. And, you know, I think it's important for us to ask these questions. We're up against that wall of these people. So I think it's, you know, that's what we try to do here on this show. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.